think it's almost unanimously agreed that the 80s was probably the best decade. I got 5 reasons that I'm gonna tell you why I think it actually was. So yes, I got the sunglasses on today. It's because I feel cool as shit talking about the 80s. Let's get into this list. My number one thing that I think makes the 80s probably the best decade of all is the music. So not only is the 80s considered home to some of the most iconic hair music and pop music and alternative music and rock music out there, but it's also considered the golden age of hip hop. But first, when it comes to pop music, Prince is my everything. Prince is my all-time favorite artist of any decade, of any genre, of any period, any era, just of all time. Prince is everything when it comes to music for me. I got vinyl, I got CDs, I got an extensive digital collection. So Prince in the 80s for me is life. But as far as the golden age of hip hop, for those of you who are fans of this, certain acts such as Fat Boys, Biz Markie, Salt and Pepper, Eric B. and Rakim, A Tribe Called Quest, Beastie Boys, Slick Rick, LL Cool J, Run DMC, NWA, Too Short, Big Daddy Kane, Ghetto Boys, Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Oh yeah, the guy you know as Will Smith today actually got his start doing rap primarily back in the 80s, telling people about his parents that don't understand him and how Freddy Krueger was out to kill his DJ. So music is number 1 on my list of things that I think makes the 80s great. Number 2 is none other than movies. The 80s is iconic for movies that you will never ever forget, even if you watch them retrospectively. I've even made videos on my other channel giving nods to movies back in the 80s, like Back to the Future. But can you really forget Karate Kid, Child's Play, The Never-Ending Story, Beverly Hills Cop, Ferris Bueller, Ghostbusters, E.T., Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Stand By Me, Dirty Dancing, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Do the Right Thing, Indiana Jones, Terminator, Nightmare on Elm Street, Die Hard, Poltergeist, and the list goes on and on. I can name off so many of these movies, but there's something about the 80s movies, and you know, one of the things I think that makes 80s movies iconic is the fact that back then they used a more practical way to do effects as opposed to today where they use more digital. Everything's more digital, which it looks great. I'm not trying to reject how far we've come in technology, but the way they did it back then, the practical way, just adds a little bit more nostalgia to it, and it just makes it feel slightly more authentic 80s, in my opinion. But on a side note, even TV shows back then were a little bit different. Remember how when your favorite TV show came on, the intro was like 5 minutes long? We don't really get intros like that anymore. There are a few, but not many. I miss those. I see it now. Also, one more thing on this number 2. 80s commercials were better than today's ads. I see it now. Okay, so moving on to number 3 on my list, it has to be, I'm gonna call it freedom. Now what I mean by that, at least in the States, is there used to be like block parties. You used to be able to have a block party like once a month or something like that, and it just be a normal thing. It's part of the culture, and it would just go off without a hitch. Until one day, I guess generations just moved on from it and just thought it was a waste of time, and it just didn't do it anymore. Also on this number 3, freedom, I can remember a time where seatbelts weren't as common. You guys remember station wagons, right? And there's no seatbelts back there. You just pile the kids in, stuff them in there, and you get on your way, even driving on the highway. And what about common sense stuff? I can remember getting sent to the store to buy cigarettes for my neighbors that smoked. There was no questioning about it. They knew I wasn't buying it for myself. Now, am I saying some kids didn't smoke them? Absolutely not. But remember the freedom? Also, kid-to-kid babysitting. There used to be a house full of kids, 11 and under, and we're all just babysitting each other, even with actual toddlers in the house. I don't know, that just feels a little more free to me than today's world. Moving on to number 4 on my list is schools. Now, I'm only going by what I see schools as on the outside looking in today. From what I can see, there really aren't the field trips and the outings in today's schools that we used to have back then. I can remember at least once every couple months, we would take a field trip somewhere, whether it's going to the science center, whether it's going to a zoo, whether it's going to a nature walk, a botanical garden. We just used to take trips, a theme park, randomly. I mean, I guess it was to learn something on most of them, but I don't really see that. Maybe I'm just not looking. Maybe I don't see it on the outside looking in, like I said, but I don't see much of that in today's schools. Also, school playground equipment is either non-existent or really, really safe. Like I always see these little childish stuff that we never had when we were on the playground in schools. Like we actually had the stuff that could cause you to scrape a knee or bump a noggin or fall and mess yourself up for a little while. You just get up and brush that shit off, man, and keep it moving. Now, everything is all safe and stupid. And then also in the schools, it doesn't look like there's much hands-on. Because back then, they didn't have computer technology to babysit us or fill in for that direct hands-on teacher-to-student interaction. Today, it just looks like they depend too much on computers, and it's just not the same, in my opinion. So on to this last category on this list. I'm gonna call it social interaction. Y'all knew it was coming. So the number one difference that made the 80s so much better with social interaction is not having mobile devices as a distraction. Check out any group of teenagers nowadays, even younger than teenagers, 95% of them will be on their phones. They'll be having conversations while on their phone. Oh, did you see this? I'll send it to you. Oh, did you see that? Oh, it's a meme. It's funny. We didn't have that. Interaction and finding funny shit and things to be entertained by was found in here and in here. You had to have some creativity back then. Nowadays you don't, because everything is right here. Whenever we were bored, we'd go out on skateboards or go out on bike rides, go out on hikes, go riding through the woods, playing sports, going to the park. We found things to do. Creativity just came to us because that's what kids do naturally, but today's world doesn't allow that. Now, I'm all for No Kid Left Behind. I'm all for it to a certain extent. What we should be doing is encouraging kids' creativity. We should be boosting them up. We should want them to be able to do more with less. Now, we definitely played the shit out of some video games, but we made competition out of it and it didn't last all day. Video games was that for the moment and we're outside, we're off. Today's kids can do everything from inside their bedroom. And I'm not mad at technology, that's not the point of this video. What I'm trying to say is, it's just different and I personally think the 80s was better. So that's my list and you can let me know if you disagree with it. You just might and that's okay. But in my opinion, the 80s were the greaties.